Good morning, Buffalo. You're listening to the Buffalo Yo podcast. My name is Brian Dudeman. Right now, I'm going to introduce my co-host, the very lovely Ari Nicole.
Oh, me? Hey, dude, man, are you up?
I am always up. I am always awake. I'm always ready to podcast. Are you up?
Yes, Ari Nicole is up and excited to podcast with her buddy Dude Man and this exciting guest we have here.
Yes, would you please go ahead and introduce yourself?
I am an exciting guest. I am Richard Fysh.
What are your titles? What are your hats? What do you do in the Buffalo film community?
I think I said to you before we started, like anything they ask me to, I tend to act in other people's films and then do every job on my own. Writing, directing, camera, editing, lighting, catering, for transportation. Like if there's a job on a film, it's me.
So now we're going to go ahead and introduce our first segment of the show. The first segment is called Fan Mail. So basically the way Fan Mail works is you guys send in your questions to the Buffalo Yo podcast. We will ask it right here in the podcast. Guest of the week will answer. So without further ado, Ari Nicole, will you please ask the first question?
I got some questions from Instagram here. This one here is ActorFreak49. And they said, do you have a favorite genre to work with and why?
I love this question. No, because I like most things. I'd actually thought you were going to ask something like this, and so I recently on one of my extravagant shopping trips to the Goodwill, I picked up 4 DVDs, and they were all like, I can't remember what they were now, but they were all like completely different genres. I had like An Affair to Remember, and Star Wars, and I don't know, like a horror movie. No, The Exorcist I think was one of them, and movie number 4 escapes me. And it's like I will watch anything that's good. I don't really.
But it's to working with.
Well, I mean, no, but I think it's the same thing because the things that you want to watch are the things you want to make. No.
Oh, okay.
So.
Okay.
I find that at this, I've been told by a few people that at this no budget level you should be making horror films, and I'm not really a horror person, and yet there are horror films I love, and in the film I'm making now it's sort of horror, satire, musical, some comedic elements, and then there's some really serious drama. In fact, finding the tone in the edit is probably the thing that's going to give me the most challenge. Like it works, but it's kind of like it's got its own unique identity that is a mix of genres. Whereas in the past, I have deliberately done things along certain lines. So if you watch The Lodger, that is me deliberately making a Hitchcock-style film, like with no shame. It's not a remake of Hitchcock's Lodger, like the title is a coincidence, but it was me trying to make sort of like an episode of Alfred Hitchcock Presents.
Inspired by.
Yeah. And just the sort of the sense of humor and the plot and some of the way the film is put together were very much inspired by that. Not in a I think I'm Hitchcock kind of way, because I'm not.
Tribute.
I wanted to make something tonally similar to those old movies, because what I like popular films, and I think when a lot of people say that, and this is getting a bit of a cliche now, it's like cinema begins with Star Wars or cinema begins with Jaws. It doesn't. Like, I watch things from the 30s, the 40s, the 50s, the 60s, but it's mostly Hollywood. Whereas I think a lot of people who say like, oh, I'm a film person, they'll watch like all of these films from all over the world that unless you really go looking for, you're unlikely to find. Whereas I've just always gone like, oh, that's there, I'll watch it. That's there, I'll watch it. And then I've kind of found from what was available, oh, this was good, this was good, this was good. And a lot of the time that's been finding things that are old, because I think it's easier to find films that used to be well known, but now aren't, than it is to go, I'm going to go and explore Vietnamese cinema. And like, there's people who do that, but like, that's not, I've got very limited knowledge of those kind of global things. But then also being foreign and having this kind of American cinema always be a little bit alien to me. It kind of has this strange mix of like, now that I live in the US, it's like, oh, this thing that I thought was movie land is just everyday life to people. not everything, but there's certain things that are just kind of taken for granted as normal, but they're actually not normal. And it's only when you're not part of it, or when you've grown up with something else, that you start to think, oh, that's a little bit strange. I see why that's the way it is. And I'm completely off topic again. But I love also that element of film. It's like you can see a different time, you can see a different place. And the genre is almost secondary to me to kind of the feeling that you get from entering into another world. Whether that's some big blockbuster that honestly I'm getting bored of, not to be a snob, it's just that I think all the best blockbusters have already been made, and now they're just trying to make them again.
Everybody's trying to go, look what I can do. Look what I can do.
Yeah, and it's kind of, oh, this was a hit, let's do that again. And like now the requel, like let's do the same movie but recast it to get a like hip audience or whatever. I don't know.
You mentioned a little bit about the film you're working on, and some very diverse genres came out.
Yeah.
That sounds very interesting.
So the movie I'm working on that is completely shot, that I haven't announced on any of my social media or anything. I haven't even spoken about this, although Mark spoke about it last week on here. It's called 7 Kills, 3 Songs, and a Banana. And that title is me trying to say, this is some things in this movie, come and look at it. You know, it's very much a poster title or a DVD title, rather than, you know, if I was an established director and I had an audience, I wouldn't call it that. But I'm like, what can I call this movie where people are going to go, what the is that?
That's going to get people's attention.
That's
yes, because that's a title that just stands out. I've never heard it before. Yeah. I'll never hear it again. It's unique.
So if you want to see kills or hear songs,
I like bananas.
Exactly. If you like bananas, this is the movie for you.
As long as the banana doesn't get killed.
Well, I mean, I don't want to give any spoilers before the movie's edited. So, but banana lovers of all shapes and sizes will be satisfied by this film.
I'm very much looking forward to hearing more and seeing more about this.
Brooke, 21, Ithaca. How long did it take to film What You Can't Promise?
3 days. Well, no, 2 nights. 3 days. Yeah.
And how long did it take to actually write it?
Well, it depends what counts, because I had ideas going for, I don't know, a few weeks before I ever started writing anything. I always do this. I like, what do I want in the film? And then I just throw ideas at the page that can be characters, plot points, scenario, like even things like jokes, random lines, and then tone, like what do I want to do in a film, and then I throw all those things together, and then I start kind of going through and see if I can find links, like what would work with what's a story I could tie around this. So the long answer, I suppose, is, I don't know, month and a half, I don't know. Or
that is quick for a feature film like that. Like that film came clocked at like I think an hour and 11 minutes. So that
good research. It is an hour and 11 minutes. I think it might be 11 seconds as well, because geekdom. No, but the actual script was like 5 days, I think, because I kind of knew what everything was, and I'd plotted it out, and I had like a piece of paper that's this happens, and then taking that document and turning it into a script, I just did over a few days. Yeah.
So there's something that I noticed between Katie's Ghost and also What You Can't Promise, and that was like the sense of loss, because in What You Can't Promise, the character lost his father. Katie's Ghost, I think there's a longing for a mother. Was that intentional or merely coincidence?
I think in What You Can't Promise, it was just, how can I have this person have a house and have an excuse for him to also feel a little bit strange and not quite sure what's going on in his own house. Like, that was just to set up the first scene. Like, how does this person arrive and think they have a reservation and the guy have no knowledge of it? So that it was more of a device than anything else, but I think it also helped make that character vulnerable for what happens in the story. So it was kind of like, oh yeah, this is the perfect thing. Whereas Katie's Ghost is like, that's the focus. Like, Katie's Ghost is a story about grief, and the film Katie's Ghost is actually a very, very short vignette version of the novel that I wrote. That is, it's about grief. I mean, it's almost a self-help book. It's a narrative, but it's a sort of supernatural element, real world kind of teen angst combined with grief. I honestly think Katie's Ghost is the best thing I've written, but it's also because it's a book, people aren't going to read it. Whereas a film, it's like, hey, watch this, and then in an hour and 11 minutes, they're done.
So you said grief, which is another, like I said, the recurrent theme. Is that something that like hits home to you? Is that something that you're kind of like wrestling with right now?
Not right now, no. I think it's dangerous to write about things that you're currently dealing with, because then it just becomes that you're like using art as catharsis, or you're kind of like struggling through things in your personal life by putting them to film, and I think that can be dangerous if you start to do that. But then it's definitely something that I have experience of, and when you write, you kind of, I mean, I say when I write, I kind of find myself taken back to moments. I know there's a thing with acting, emotion memory, which I'm not a fan of, that actors like to do that, but and you can get stuck, and I don't think it's the best idea for acting. I mean, I'm sure it works for some people, but with writing, I do find that helpful. Or the other thing I do is I sort of act as I write. So when I'm writing a script, I kind of play all of the characters. You know, when I'm writing a certain character, I become that person. This is going to make me sound insane. I like become that person in my head as I'm writing each part. So in What You Can't Promise, I was both characters as I was writing it. If that.
All right, next question from Instagram. This is from a film fan for life. What is your proudest film accomplishment to date?
I think the fact that we made What You Can't Promise, and that I wrote something and was in it and edited it and filmed it for the most part.
I have the DVD.
And sold a couple of copies.
Sign it.
And I will totally do that. And made back the budget on What You Can't Promise. Like, it's not buying me a new kitchen or nothing, but it didn't cost me anything to make. That's an accomplishment. And no, actually the biggest accomplishment with that is the fact that it's got such a good rating on IMDb. And like, there's reviews, and then there's kind of reviews from people who've got no connection to me. Like, I've just kind of randomly stumbled across a couple of times. There's one that I didn't ask them to review it. I don't know really how they got the movie, but I found this review for my film, and it was like 4 stars and really in depth and detail, and I was like, wow.
Ellen, 32 Eden, do you plan on bringing your Making It and Filmmaking podcast back anytime soon? I really enjoyed what I've heard so far.
Yeah, I do. I love that podcast. There's a couple of people I've been trying to get for a while who we've not been able to organize a time, because it has to be when we're both free and when I've got a place I can record it and so on. There's a few people I've reached out to for that. Mostly the major delay is me balancing either things that are paying me or editing my own film. I kind of feel like that has to take priority until it's done. But I do want to keep doing the podcast, because it's real. I mean, as I say on the podcast, it's mostly for me to like hear people's fascinating stories and see how people are doing what they're doing, what level they're at, where they got to, how they're going to improve going forward. If it's people I can work with or take ideas from them, or just generally have really nice, real conversations about people who share that passion. I don't know, I just love films, and talking to people. And it's not always film people, I've spoken to people who are sort of creative in other ways, like theatre people or musicians, or there was a VFX artist, and I just like kind of those people who are some way involved with movie making, but mostly it's, and especially more now it's like anyone can do this. And I think what I was kind of lacking growing up was this kind of belief, and that's still the major stumbling block for me, is like, can we do this? Like, and then it's just kind of reassuring to see all these people who are really going for it, especially the ones who are more successful, because most of the people I talked to on the podcast are like way further along in their filmmaking life than I am.
I completely 1,000% agree. when I started the podcast, I did it because I didn't have any projects like at all. So I knew it would be a great opportunity to work with people who I've always wanted to work with. So the people that I bring on to this podcast are people that like I've either worked with before, but I don't have anything for them to do now. So I'm like, hey, let's just do a few episodes together or something like that. And then also hearing their stories like makes me want to go out and film something because sometimes you hit that wall creatively where you just are stuck and you don't feel inspired, but listen to other people's enthusiasm, listen to other people's stories about how excited they are. It makes me want to go out and it reignites that fire to just go out and film again. So I totally agree with that 100%.
Looking around the studio makes me want to go and invest in some microphones. Like, oh my god, I'm making a podcast with some, what is it, like sellotape or scotch tape and like lollipop sticks, whereas this is like, wow, I'm in a studio.
Well, what I love about your podcast is that you ask really exciting and thoughtful questions. So my question for that is, do you prepare yourself for that? Like, do you pre-write your questions before the podcast? Or are they like spontaneity? Do you just like once you start riffing with someone, you're like, okay, this is what I want to know now?
The first few episodes I did, I think I wrote things down. I definitely knew what I wanted to ask. I would look up the person, see what their projects. I still do this. Like I see what people are currently working on, and if they've got stuff online, I'll watch it, and just so I know, kind of springboards to ask questions. If it's someone who does something very different to what I do, I try to come up with questions that make me sound like I have a vague idea of what it is they do. Or, I'll ask people to explain things on the podcast because I have had some quite niche people on there. And I feel like to some listeners, it's like, okay, well, this is definitely obvious. But to me, it's like, oh, what is that? In a way that I can learn from. Although, to answer the original question, I don't now. Like now what I do is if it's someone that I don't personally know, and sometimes it is, I watch their stuff and then I don't premeditate any of the questions. I just get talking to them and I kind of use my knowledge of them as maybe I could ask about this one thing. Like not even if there's a lull, just if somebody says something that clearly has relevance to something that I've learned by reading about them, then I'll follow up with that.
Eric31 Tanawada, I just saw the short film you did with Heather Dunham. I absolutely love Deadline. Do you ever feel that pressure in real life to get a script done?
No, I don't feel that pressure to write a script. Because all the pressure I have is from myself. I think if someone like Heather could come and hold a gun to my head, that might be a useful situation. So if you haven't seen Deadline, go and watch it. It's fun. And it's about it's never really said if she's the girlfriend, but I guess she is. Like, who kind of encourages a man to finish his script by threatening to kill him. It's effective. No one's ever done that for me, no. But I don't know. Like I like to finish things. So if I start something, I might decide, yeah, this isn't good enough and not do it. But once I'm like, yeah, I'm making this, then I just do it and sort of treat it like a job. And it is hard to do that. I always think the first half hour of anything is the hardest part. So whether it's editing a film or writing a film or sitting down to learn lines, like once you get through those first 30 minutes, you can pretty much do anything. It's just getting off social media, like getting off, wasting your time doing whatever. Just once it's past half an hour, you're fine. Like that's the biggest challenge, the first half hour, anything.
This is the last question I have. Chelsea29 Dunkirk. I just saw Victoria's music video and read that you did the cinematography. Who reached out to who, and do you plan on making any more music videos with her?
I would. She reached out to me. And I think it was just like a cash message, like, oh, would you be free to help me do this? I've got an idea. I was like, all right. And then she knew what she wanted, and she's open to ideas, and like we tried a couple of things and experimented, but it was really quite fun to watch because she she was clearly getting she became transformed. Like when she was singing, she was just like wrapped up, and she'd be like singing, and you almost like taken in, but like, whoa, I'm watching something really quite hypnotic here. And then she kind of breaks and goes back to being Victoria, and you get like a little wake up, and you're like, oh yeah, no, we're doing a thing. You're like, I was kind of like drawn in by it, so it was great. So even filming it, I could tell that it was going to work. And she's very self-aware of how she is on screen and like what she's trying to do and how it works. And obviously she's a phenomenal singer. And I think the one we did with it being in French as well was kind of interesting because I speak a bit of French, so it was good to kind of follow what she was singing about.
The cinematography was very beautiful, and I thought it was very well color graded. And like you said, the moments where she's transformed into the character, but then also later on when she does the cut, I love that. That was so cute.
Yeah. And there were tons of cute moments like that. And it's funny because when she does the cut, like she herself cuts from being, I mean, she's obviously herself in the videos, but she's kind of in character doing a thing. And then she kind of becomes like, I guess, quirky and like, you know, normal. Whereas in the singing, she's a presence, you know. She's kind of got like an aura to her. And then just her as a person, she's like, oh, she's totally chill, you know. Yeah, and the color grading was all her. Like she took what I shot and made it look fantastic because she's got a really good visual eye.
All right, well, that just about does it for fan mail. Guys, remember, if you want your questions asked, just bring it onto the podcast. We'll ask it right here. I guess we'll answer. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back.
And we are back. Buffalo, you up? I am Ari Nicole, and I'm here with my co-host, Dude Man.
I am up. Are you up?
Yes, I am, and I'm excited for this next section of our podcast here with Richard Fysh with the Y. This section is called Plug Yourself, so please let us know where we can find you. Do you have any websites? Do you have any DVDs? Do you have any films that we can look up and stream? What is your Instagram? And where else in the world is Richard Fysh?
I am everywhere. No, yes, there's films you can watch, depending on where you are. So, in Buffalo, you can watch What You Can't Promise, which is the feature film that I keep talking about that I made a couple of years ago. The most effective way for you to watch that is to go on Tubi, where you can watch it for free. Yes, there's adverts. If you really hate adverts, you can buy it on Amazon streaming video, or if you really like the movie, you can buy a copy from it's one of those really awkward links, but you can buy it from my website, which is richardfysh.com, which
with
is
a Y.
with a Y, yeah, but not fishy, like Richard Fysh, because I've said that. I used to say fish with a Y, but then so many people like fishy. I'm like, no. So yeah, the other thing that people might be interested in, like I mentioned, like the thing that I think was the best piece of writing I've done is Katie's Ghost, the book, which is also on Amazon. Katie's Ghost, Richard Fysh, and then the thing that I ought to be promoting is the film that will be out in the spring, no firm date. It's going to be showing at the Niagara Arts and what's that place called? The Niagara Arts and Cultural Centre.
Yes.
And they are going to show the film, and then I will try and get it on some of the other independent screens in Buffalo. The great thing about Buffalo is there are several places you can go. Like there's the screening room that I've spoken about, the North Park, the Dipson theaters. Like all of those places will let you show a film, and so this is actually a really good place to be for films. But anyway, when the film gets done, like watch those places because it'll be at some of them. 7 Kills, 3 Songs, and a Banana, and that has a lot of local talent in. Mark Bogomil, who was on the show recently, is in that movie, and a bunch of other people are in the Banana movie, and I will not apologize for that awful pun. So you can watch other things. You can watch The Lodger, you can watch Maya. They're both on Amazon. They're actually both on YouTube now as well, so you can watch them for free just by searching Richard Fysh plus title of movie, because those ones don't have what is it, the search engine optimization, like they don't come right up. Whereas What You Can't Promise, that's an expression, you put that in, you get the movie. So that's where you can find me, and I'll try and improve my website because it's, I guess everyone says this, like I kind of made it and then I was like, oh, I should keep that up to date, and don't. The other place you can check me out is my podcast, which does have a bunch of back episodes, and there will be some new ones at some point. That's Making It in Movie Making, and I would assume anyone listening to this would also be interested in that because it's about people trying to make it in movies and what they're doing. And that's not specifically local people, but I have spoken to quite a few people in this area as part of that. I think that's everything. I mean, yeah, I don't use Instagram. There's an Instagram page for What You Can't Promise that has some promotional stuff on there, but I don't use it. I use Facebook because I'm a dinosaur.
And now we're going to switch things up a little bit. We're going to go into the next segment. This one is called A Hero's Journey. So basically the way a hero's journey works is we ask the filmmaker of the week how they got their start in films. So for you, how'd you get into writing? How'd you get into directing? How'd you get into cinematography, acting?
Well, what happened was my planet was about to explode. So my parents put me in this spacecraft and sent me across many dimensions, and I crash landed on Earth. No, that's Superman. No, mine, I always liked films, and so I wanted to make a film, but because I'm old as shit, no one could video anything. We didn't have video cameras in our pockets when I was first trying to make films. So I eventually, after years of wanting to film something or other, managed to borrow my friend's dad's camcorder, which was already about 10 years out of date when I borrowed it.
VHS?
VHS-C, like small VHS
I started
tapes.
with the big ones.
And you could put them inside a larger VHS tape if you wanted to play them through a VCR, which is exactly how I edited the movie. So for that first film, every time I wanted to do a cut, I had to be really conscious because you would get a little tracking flicker on the video, so you couldn't really do all the shots you can do now and have it edit smoothly, because every time you cut, you'd get like a... And this was like mono sound, and the resolution was like less than whatever. It was like 200 lines or something, because this was lines before everything was pixels. 200 interpolated lines of poor colours and onboard sound, so you could hear all the camera noise, and it's not great. And I mean, if you look at my IMDb, my legitimate children, I've made like 5 movies, but really I've probably made like 25 or 30. I just didn't really do anything with most of them. They were just for fun. Because, as I mentioned at some point, YouTube wasn't a thing. So you'd make a video and you'd be the only person doing that because nobody else had video cameras. And so you'd be the little weird kid who wanted to make videos. And some people would think it was great. Some people would make fun of it. But I never thought, because I don't really want to like blame the culture, but in a way I do, because I'm from a background and an upbringing where we basically, here it's like anything is possible, whereas there it's like, yeah, be real, go and get a job in a coal mine. Come on, stop dreaming about doing these things. And I probably should, because here I am, 20 some years later, and I'm still not making a living from doing this.
You're still living.
I'm still living, and I think actually this is a good point. I think there should be an intermediate goal of, do I want to be a big Hollywood filmmaker? Yeah, probably I do, but that's not the only way that I could live and be a filmmaker. Like, I can have other jobs and just make sure that I do dedicate time to make films, and as long as it's not becoming a financial burden. I mean, even if I make a film that costs money and I never make the money back, if it's money that I would have otherwise spent on a holiday or like a new gadget or, like a fancy clothes or something, then I'm actually happier to have spent a bit of money on making a film. I mean, the other good thing about films is once you've made them, you've got them forever. I mean, I've got films where I can see myself as a 16-year-old. There are loads of us, and now it's getting to the point where I feel like I know most people, or I know of most people in the local area that are doing this. And by local area, I mean like Western New York. Like it's a broad place, but like Buffalo plus, and like Rochester, there's a few people coming out of Rochester. that are all involved in this scene, and everybody kind of knows everyone, and we all help each other, and we're all kind of willing to believe in each other's dreams. And I think that that's the biggest difference that I would say Buffalo has that compared to at home. Like, there's a few people at home that are like very like-minded, but you're still, people kind of, I get the sense at least that people kind of treat it with a little bit of suspicion. It's like, oh yeah, he's doing that one thing, yeah, I don't know, maybe you should go and get a day job. Whereas here, you know, if you tell people you're making a film, most of the people I've met at least are like, yeah, that's great, how can I help? Or can you help me do this thing? Or then you find yourself getting invited to apply for acting jobs because they know you by reputation. I was like, oh wow, okay, cool. And so I've done that. Like, I've had a few acting jobs that were basically because one person knew someone else who knew someone else who knew someone else who said do a self-tape, so I did. And yeah, and I like that. And I it's weird because I do really like being involved in other people's projects as an actor as well as making my own. So feel free to cast me. Yeah, I'm rambling, but like my journey as a filmmaker is I started making a film one day, and then I made another one, then I made another one, then I made another one, then another one, and the biggest thing for me has not been coming up with stories or finding places to show them. It's just my own journey of believing that this is actually something that you can do both as a job and just a bit of fun. Like, I would always do it as a bit of fun, but it's getting more and more plausible in my mind that actually you could do this as a career and take myself seriously. And I don't mean I was ever not taking myself seriously, but like take myself seriously in the sense of believe that it's a thing that people do and that I could be one of the people that are doing it.
That is a good final note for that segment. All right, well, we have to take a quick break. We'll be right back with more. And we are back. You're listening to the Buffalo You Up podcast. My name is Brian Dudeman. My co-host is
Ariana Nicole, and I am up as always. Hey, Dudeman, are you still up?
always. And our guest this week,
Richard Fysh.
And so now we're going to jump into the last segment of the podcast episode. This is where we get your final thoughts. So what do you think about being on the podcast? What advice would you give to future guests that are going to be sitting right there in that seat? And yeah, anything else that's on your mind that you just want to get out there?
Okay, so fun, it's been really fun being on the podcast, and it's interesting for me because when I do my own podcast, I try to say as little about myself as possible because I want it to be about the guests, and also I'm quite self-conscious about what I put out there in the world for fear of embarrassing myself or upsetting anyone or, you know, crossing somebody the wrong way, and I feel like a lot of times it's easier to just not. Whereas films is different because it's, you know, it's like it's a story or whatever. It's not me. And I think it's the same thing with Instagram. So yeah, being on the podcast has been great because you've kind of both made me think about why I'm doing this, and I wouldn't necessarily ask myself those questions. So yeah, it's been nice to kind of reflect upon why I do the things that I do. And it's also like validation. Like, it's nice that you invite me to be here. I'm like, oh, people have heard of me? All right, okay. I'll come on your podcast. It sounds great. And like the setup you have here, as I mentioned before, it's inspirational. I'm like, oh, I wish I had this kind of stuff.
So now here is the part where when I remember this, so it's not every episode, but when I remember this, we ask the guests if they have any questions for the hosts.
It's weird. Like, you don't have to do this on the episode if you want, but just from things you've said in the conversation area, I would like to know how, like, what was your kind of breakthrough moment of I need to change the way I'm thinking? Because you said to me like a few kind of inspirational things, but like, what was your kind of, you know what, I don't need to do that anymore? Like where was the positivity thing?
Many stages. It's a very long story. Like I had mentioned, and we're obviously not going to drag this episode on to 10 episodes of my story, but like I mentioned earlier, I was adopted twice. So I had a very rough upbringing. Growing up as a child, I never really got to be a child, and I didn't have that stability or support. I also didn't have that, not necessarily guidance, but that forcefulness that some parents often try to push their children into certain careers. And so I consider that a blessing in a sense that, I was able to choose my own path because I wasn't told. I mean, at one point, one of my parents, so at one point they told me that I should either go into to nursing, but no, being given not a lot of guidance and just kind of looking at the world from my perspective of seeing things just like not in a good place. I basically said at a very young age, I'm not doing life like this. It's going to get better. And I made decisions whenever I could. So, yeah, it really does come from within. It's not as easy as it sounds. It really is something that you have to work on every day. For example, I'll wake up in the morning and my roommate will start complaining about the storm that's going to happen next month. And I could get wrapped up in that and start complaining and, start bringing down my day. Or I can just shut that out and let myself stay in a positive mindset and put out that we're going to have a nice, mild winter so that people in Buffalo can get where they need to get without worrying about accidents and traffic, and because
opening the front door.
Yeah, exactly. None of us like dealing with, so just putting that positive energy out on a daily basis, it really did change my life. And like I said, when I was younger, things were really rough. Things were out of my control. As a child, you kind of are forced into what your parents are doing.
Yeah.
And so when I didn't have control of my life, it wasn't good. And so I knew that as soon as I got the control that I would make things better, because it had to be better in order for me to survive, because I just wasn't going to put up with things the way they were. And I realized at a young age that anything I set my mind to do that I could accomplish. I was one of those nerds in school who, as soon as they handed out the homework paper, I started doing it in class to get it done before class was even over. And that wasn't the point, and the teachers didn't like that. But I digress. You set your mind to something and you can do it. And I learned that at a young age on my own. I taught myself that. And so it is really true for anybody. And the reason why most people are held back is themselves and the doubt they have. Yeah. Yes, failure happens, but it only happens if you try. And if it's worth living for, it's worth doing.
Oh, and it's just off what you said. It is so. It's like the fear that you're gonna fail is way worse than actually failing. I know that I'm starting to sound like one of those cheesy posters, but it's true. Like what you're saying is like, if you try something and it completely falls apart, you feel better for having tried.
Fear kills more dreams than failure ever will.
Yep.
And I didn't write that, so don't give me credit.
Steal it. Give her credit.
Don't give me credit. But yes, believe in yourself. That has to come, because like I said, I was adopted twice. I didn't have supportive parents. Nobody believed in me. Everybody told me I was useless and good for nothing. So I had to find that worth within myself without the support of anyone. And it's not easy.
That in itself is hard though, no?
It's very hard when you don't have that support system growing up. If you grow up with parents who are always like, I love you, you're doing great, you can do whatever you want, it's a lot easier to build self-worth.
Right, because that's what sets your base. That's what sets your idea of self.
But when you don't have that stable upbringing, and so you have to find that within yourself. One thing that I did write: through suffering stands true strength. Say that 5 times fast. It's a tongue twister, but it's the strength that you realize you have when you find your worth. Because once you know your worth, nobody can take that away from you. And that is one of the strongest strengths you can have. And it's within you. So just believe it.
It was a fantastic answer. Like, I'm glad I asked. Because it's true. Because that is my thing. Like the self-belief. Like, I'll believe that I can do a thing. But the idea that it'll be successful, like that to me is challenging. I'm like, why would anyone do that?
You're also seeing things from your point of view, and you're not seeing things from other people's point of view.
Yeah, definitely.
So just to give you an example from my point of view, because I've been working in the Buffalo film industry. Actually, I started back in 2004 when I was young with the Lionsgate film by Bill Cowell. But got back into, I started theater school in 2011 and came back into the film industry in 2012. So I've been connected with a lot of people in this area for at least a decade. And for you, for example, when you showed up into the Buffalo film atmosphere, you kind of stood out right away to people. And the fact that you have that, you don't seem to realize you have that, but so like to see from another person's perspective, like everybody kind of knows everybody around here, and when someone new pops up, very rarely do they get noticed unless they're actually really good at what they're doing.
Actually, I was absolutely shocked. I mean, I realized we're going on and I'm not finishing, but like when I did the premiere for What You Can't Promise, and it like filled the screening room, and like the Q&A afterwards, they kept me there for like longer than the movie, and that was amazing. Like really good questions, and not only that, but like people who wanted to like buy a copy, and just like that was like, oh wow, like this worked.
Not every filmmaker who comes into this community does so well, and it just is basically their talent and their skill and their work and what they do. So just keep it up.
Thanks. Appreciate that.
I'm glad we had you on this podcast. Well, my voice is getting tired, so obviously that means that I am drained. I think it's time for me to hit the hay.
Dude Man is not going to be up for much longer.
That is correct. So, until the next episode, I've been Brian Dudeman, my co-host.
Ari Nicole, as always.
And we just have one question for you, Buffalo. 1, 2, 3. You up? Okay, and 3, 2, 1, action.
I sign, so I sign.